Order. The House is resumed and comes first to questions for oral answer. First question stands in the name of Michael Woodhouse.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Finance. What signs of progress, if any, is he seeing of the economy rebalancing from borrowing and consumption to savings and exports?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, there is no doubt we are seeing some early signs of progress. First, we've had 5 consecutive quarters of growth in the past year, and GDP has expanded by just under 2%. Secondly, growth is being reflected in a steady improvement in the jobs market. Unemployment has fallen from a peak of 7.1% to 6.4%, and there are 40,000 more people in jobs today than there were 1 year ago. We expect a steady rise in new jobs to continue next year.
Before I call the Honourable Member, could I just ask members please to keep the conversations down a little? The background noise makes it very hard to hear. Michael Woodhouse.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Supplementary to the Minister, what factors are driving the recovery?
The Honourable Bill English.
Speaker, first, growth is being driven by exports rather than debt-fuelled consumption or excessive government spending. In the past year, the value of New Zealand's exports increased by 15%. Secondly, New Zealanders are choosing to pay down debt and increase their savings rather than borrow for consumption or housing speculation. It is encouraging that the recovery is being built on savings, investment and exports rather than consumption, housing speculation and wasteful government spending.
Michael Woodhouse.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister, what impact is that shift towards increased saving having on New Zealand's economic and fiscal outlook?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, increased household saving will create a stronger platform for faster growth further down the track. However, it means the recovery will not be driven by sectors like retail and housing. So there will be a flatter domestic economy in the short term. This trend, along with the weaker global outlook, is likely to mean a lower growth forecast for the year to March 2011 in the half-year fiscal update before the economy rebounds further in the following year. Combined with the impacts of the Canterbury earthquake, it also means slightly higher deficits in the short term before the deficit starts improving.
Michael Woodhouse.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister, what implications does the economic outlook have for government spending decisions?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the government has continued with a high level of spending to support this economy through the recession. In particular, a large-scale spend on infrastructure is supporting thousands of jobs around the country. But these figures remind us that there are always risks, or that there are risks in this recovery because of the nature of the New Zealand recession and then the global recession that got government finances in trouble, and we will have to reinforce consistent discipline for the next 5 or 6 years at least in order to get the government's books back to surplus.
The Honourable David Parker.
Will next month's half-year economic and fiscal update from Treasury show higher than forecast economic growth for the year to March 2011, or will he once again be forced to acknowledge the economy is doing worse than he predicted just months ago?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, it's been clear for some time now that the economic recovery has been a bit flatter over recent months for the reasons that we have talked about in the House extensively. New Zealanders are paying off debt, they're saving more. That is good for the economy and good for them, but it does mean there isn't the same flush of spending in housing and construction. I have to say, if there was a flush of spending in housing and construction, I would be concerned about it.
The Honourable Sir Roger Douglas.
Mr. Speaker, my question to the Minister of Finance. How does the Minister expect to increase savings and thereby help in rebalancing the economy when the real rate of return on bank deposits is currently less than 1% after allowing for tax and inflation?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, it is difficult to encourage people to save considerably more if they're getting less than 1% real return on their savings. This is one of the issues that the Savings Working Group is dealing with. We need to take a view of national savings, not just government or just households, and we need to look at, for instance, the interaction of the tax system with our savings instruments and see if we can do better.
The Honourable David Parker.
Has the Minister seen the Reserve Bank's financial stability report that shows business lending has fallen $9.3 billion since November 2008, while housing lending is up $8.8 billion? And doesn't this show that his measures to rebalance the economy are not working?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, I have seen the report and no, it doesn't.
The Honourable David Parker.
Given that the wage gap with Australia continues to grow, business lending is down, the government deficit is up, and New Zealanders are more indebted than ever to the banks in the rest of the world, when will he admit that, as Bernard Hickey said this week of the government, and I quote, "The grand plan is in shreds"?
The Honourable Bill English.
No, well, Mr Speaker, I certainly disagree with Bernard Hickey, who, like that member, is too focused on month-to-month economic figures and not strongly enough focused on the long-term shifts that this economy needs to go through. In fact, that member should be apologising for squandering the best decade of economic growth that this country has seen.
Question. The Honourable Sir Roger Douglas, supplementary
Mr
question.
Speaker, what issues is the Minister taking into account in his consideration of the tax treatment of savings? What issues is the Minister...
Order. I apologise, Honourable Member, because the level of interjection across the front of the House here, I just couldn't hear the member's question. I'd ask him to repeat it, please.
Mr Speaker,
the Honourable Sir Roger Douglas.
What issues is the Minister taking into account in his consideration of the tax treatment of savings?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, we're taking into account the way in which, some arguments, which I don't necessarily agree with, but arguments that say that our tax system inherently favours debt over savings, and that is one of the reasons that New Zealanders borrow more and save less. Now, the solutions to that are all a bit messy. The Australians have looked at some solutions, and I understand the Savings Working Group is considering those.
Question number 2, the Honourable Annette King.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.